welcome back, you all. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe below. On today's Diva Docket, we are discussing the true cost of marriage. And we're gonna, focus more so financially on the things that make a difference in terms of your coin when you are becoming one with someone. We'll have to chat later about more of the mental
The emotional cost
yeah,
is a different
but
episode.
but just really getting into, because I think that some people desire to be partnered. They do, want love in some capacity, and to build something with someone, and so that is a beautiful thing. But it is also something where you're mixing in money, maybe different ideas about money, maybe different goals with your money, and so it's very important to kind of have those conversations.
It is very important. I think um, it's important to have the conversations before you even get married.
Well, yeah.
Um, but if you forego that option and you're just now doing it, like it's never too late to sit down and have the conversations about finances and goals. Um, they say that it is one of the top two reasons for divorce. I believe infidelity is the other one.
Yeah.
Um, but finances, and does one which one leads to the causation in there is yet to be debatable. But like that is important in a marriage. It has to be talked about, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's also one of the benefits. Let's not just make it seem like it's like a whoa, a warning sign. Like that is one of the benefits of getting with someone, like to help you financially, to ease that on both planes, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a woman gets with a man to ease her financial burdens. Like, yes, a man can grow in exponential ways, even biblically. Like a woman adds value to a man so that he will have no lack of gain if when you're marrying the person that you're supposed to marry. So there are many benefits financially to being with the right person. And that's what you're going to it for, right? One of the reasons, like I said, I mean, I think it's it might sound taboo or hard, but like, yeah, like it's a marriage and a partnership is there to ease your burdens, but you have to have the conversations and kind of like be on the same page about that. We've talked about it a little bit, whether that's who's paying what bills. Now you could come into a partnership, and this is all what works for you. The important part of any of this, even as we discuss our differences and how we handle it, is that you have the conversations, is that you come upon agreeing to what's going to happen in your home, because we are not in your home, but we are not saying that this is the way that it should be done.
Yeah.
But we are saying, regardless of whose home you in, the conversation needs to happen.
Yeah. So starting out, I will say, like, the first thing, if you are looking to um get married, and we did a whole episode on it, so I won't, rehash too much, but one of the big things is to do preferably a prenup, because that is before the marriage, um, or a postnup, which is after the marriage. It's the same document, but just depending on your situation, I think pre is better just because it's taken care of, it's out the way, it's done. And I think in either situation, you should be having that discussion while you and when you are happy with each other, because then you're more likely to be very fair and want to see the other person okay. And essentially, it's just a document that says, like, if this doesn't work out for some reason, this is how we're going to divide things up. This is how we're going to divide up our assets and our debts. And I think that it can prevent a lot of fighting if unfortunately your marriage does not work out. I think it is taboo to some people because they feel like you're planning for divorce. I disagree. I don't think anyone who is divorced or went through divorce says looking back, like, I went into it thinking it wasn't going to work. No one goes into it thinking it's not going to work. But just like you have insurance for any other thing, it's just like, okay, hopefully we never have to use it,
Mm-hmm.
but we've already kind of handled that thing. And we've spoken in previous episodes. There are certain companies that have prepaid legal, so a lot of times you could get a prenup and not really pay any money because it's part of your benefits. But it's a standard, contract that many attorneys or family attorneys are familiar with. So, it is not a huge investment, but there is, outside of like a prepaid legal situation, you will, probably pay them at least a few $100s to draft that document and work that out in the way that works for you and your partner. Each of you will need to get your independent
Mm-hmm.
attorney
Mm-hmm.
because there's a conflict of interest. They can't one attorney cannot represent both of your interests. And so but it's a pretty simple process. Like I said, it's a pretty standard document. And unless you all have just a complicated order or different things going on, it should be pretty easy for them to do, and not cost you an arm and leg. But I do think it's worth the investment, for couples that are looking to be married.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think every couple needs to have a prenup just because you're getting married, but I
Fair.
do think it does make sense in certain circumstances, especially if you're an older couple that's getting married. If you're coming out of mom and dad house, going straight into your marriage, what have you accumulated?
Yeah.
Like, but for older couples, and which is becoming like very much the norm now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People in their 30s, late 30s, 40s, 50s getting married for the first time, or haven't gone through a divorce. You're probably even more akin to,
Yeah.
to getting a prenup if you've gone through a
Yeah.
divorce before. But like at that point in time, you've put in the work and accumulated a lot of things on your own, um, if for both spouses. So protecting it is just another form of having a will or another form of having insurance, and it doesn't have to be this taboo conversation, like you said, or some malicious mindset about why you want to get it. Like,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I do think that is definitely a form of protecting financial benefits in the marriage. Like I said, I think making sure that you just have the conversations about I think one of the most basic ones is like joint accounts.
Mm.
Joint accounts, separate accounts. How are we working? We are now one. So do we have one account
Mm.
because we are now one, or do we continue to have separate accounts? Like, um, I again, the things that I did see in my because like she said, bacon, egg, and cheese. We talked about finances. I knew my parents had separate accounts. They have a joint account as well, but they did have separate accounts, and that's what worked for them, and the conversation made sense to me. So it's also what I implement in conversations with my partner who agrees with it. I mean, we had a joint account for building. We knew we both like to travel, so before we even moved in together, we had a joint account for travel.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that bucketed list, but it's not like one pot, like, because I don't want him to ever feel like he's got to come to me and ask me for money or checks and balances in that way. And I don't want to feel that way either,
Mm-hmm.
But the bills are getting paid. We still have the conversations and sit down and have the conversations about what's going on, because I do feel like without having the conversations, you don't realize somebody's racking up debt or what their spending habits are. It's a lot easier when you have separate accounts for
Mm-hmm.
someone to behave against the interests of the relationship. I will say that, than it is when you can have a single account. But I also think when you have a single account, you have to deal with versions of feelings of control and trust that you might not necessarily have to do with separate accounts. So they both have their benefits. Again, we'll always say do what works for your home.
Yeah.
In our home, it is having a joint, separate accounts for what we like, the things that we desire. And bills are paid separately. Like he has the bills that he wants to pay. I have the bills that I have discussed that I would pay, and then our joint accounts are targeted for home renovations. They're targeted. They're not for bills.
Mm-hmm.
But again, everybody operates differently.
Yeah, I think, and I think some of it makes a difference too on when you get married. I think that there could be, like, when you're younger, right? You don't have as much, so you're coming together. I think that perhaps the one joint account makes more sense for some,
Mm-hmm.
stylistically. Um, the way that works, I'll just kind of explain my knowledge of it. You kind of, some people will put everything into the joint account and then they'll siphon off from there. Like everything goes in this pot, and then we're going to decide, okay, each of us gets this amount to kind of like play with, or we do take this amount and do this towards this. But it's just like this central nucleus, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I do get the benefit of very full transparency, from that standpoint. I think for me, what can be a rub, especially being older coming into a marriage, is that we don't value the same things in terms of what we would spend money on.
Mm.
So if everything is going in the joint account, then suddenly it's like, oh, you went and did this. That's not important. So, you know what I mean?
That's
Now
not
that's an
important to me,
argument.
so why? Yeah.
Right. And so I am very much a proponent of joint accounts for certain purposes. I don't have a problem with a joint account for the like bills,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a different joint account for your savings, the things that you're working towards. I do think I'm a believer in your separate checking accounts should be for the things that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
That's like my mindset. Um, Not, nothing against the one account, but I just feel like it lessens conflict, to kind of like just do joint for, your, like I said, your joint bills, your maybe even joint, debts if you have that. Um, have your joint savings for your travel, your joint savings for your emergency, and then this other stuff is for the things that we want to do, separately. So that's my thought
Mm-hmm.
process. But I do think, and I think it takes time, because here's the thing: more often than not, you're coming into a relationship with a person who had a different relationship with money, had a different background with money, and so it does take a few stabs at it to figure out what works for
Yeah,
you,
absolutely.
in terms of doing it.
And you
So
could change it. Like it's
yeah,
not like it's stagnant. Like I came in and we said joint is separate, and we can never just go to one joint. Like it's
yes,
an account.
right.
They open and
So
close all the time.
right. So like full transparency, like when me and my husband first started, like we, were more, he was more so like a joint, and I had some reservations about that, and we've like tweaked things over the month, because I will say one of the things that I'm a proponent of is the attitude of, is it, if it doesn't work for one, it doesn't work, because one
Mm.
person is going to feel
That's
a little
good. That's
resentful.
real good,
I
Ellie.
do,
I
yeah,
like that.
I do feel that way. Like it has to be, and like compromise. That it means it means
Mm-hmm.
neither one of us really got our way,
Mm-hmm.
but we figured out the best thing
For
to
us.
go about this.
Mm.
Yeah. So like, if the plan doesn't work for one of you, like keep working at and figuring out, okay, what will make you feel comfortable, because that
Mm-hmm.
is real, of coming into a situation where you're now putting your funds together and to some extent depending on each other, because
Mm-hmm.
we're like, oh, now we're moving a little different. And again, coming from being independent to like, that could be a big adjustment. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just say keep like talking and having those conversations, because it doesn't have to be stagnant. As things change, you can revamp and revise and what have you. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the other good benefits of um marriage financially is the insurance aspect of it.
Mm.
Um I believe, I mean I've never done it, so I'm guessing. I mean I know, well I do know that legally that like they've made it so you can do partnerships, add your partner to insurances, but there's a period right after you get married where you could change,
Mm-hmm.
add benefits and change the beneficiaries and add make the adjustments because you are now married and
Mm-hmm.
adding partner. So that is one of the benefits you could see. Reevaluate who has the better insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and save money that way. With job changes, that if they're equal, y'all, you might want to stay on your own for certain reasons, especially if you have kids. One person so that is
Yeah.
another financial benefit that can come, though. Like I said, I don't know if it's as big of a difference now because of the partnership thing that they have with insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But before it was a huge benefit of like marriage, because now through marriage you could be added on through insurance. So again, for some they may not have wanted to do it with their partner, but now are comfortable doing it with the spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that can be a huge, to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars a year. Of seeing, reevaluate like who has the better insurance and seeing if it makes sense. Like, did you have any experience with that?
So I, after we got married, got on his insurance. And he had a better, through, you could do it, what do they call it, life events,
Mm-hmm,
that you
mm-hmm,
can, transition and do what you need to do. I know that as, benefit season comes, we are evaluating what makes sense now,
mm-hmm,
after this first year, in terms of comparing what his benefits cover versus my company, and like who just has the better deal. Um, I think our experience with insurance was more so transitioning, and one of the things that you have to do, or you don't have to do, but it's prudent to do when you get married, is updating your like life insurance. So from that aspect, we had to have conversations in terms of, okay, what are your current premiums? What is your
mm-hmm,
coverage? He has adult children, so of course, wanting to make sure that they're also okay in the event that something happens to him. And so how to have now both coverages, because we're married and we're intermingling funds, and so there's that aspect of, if something happens to one of you, now it affects you
mm-hmm,
financially,
mm-hmm,
but then
mm-hmm.
also the children, and so possibly having to get an additional policy or look into extra coverage to kind of have both of those accounted for. So that was like one of the things in terms of the business of marriage
Mm-hmm.
that we had to do. I will say, luckily, like, life insurance is not, at least at this point in life, is not majorly expensive. So it wasn't a huge dent to the budget or anything to make those changes. I'll also say that both of us take advantage of the life insurance offered by your employer.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that coverage is through that and already a part of your benefits. You don't even really miss, it already comes, well, some of it's already included. So it
Yeah, some of
doesn't
it's
like make a
included.
difference. But if you want additional coverage on top of
Mm-hmm.
that, it might be $5-6 a pay period,
Mm-hmm.
and so something you don't necessarily miss. The downside is you have to go through, I think it's like Cobra, if you ever leave that job because that insurance policy
Mm.
ends, to keep it you have to basically kind of reach out and figure out the new premium to keep that insurance, if you want to keep that coverage. But it is, as long as you're employed with them, life insurance that is included within the cost of the benefits you already pay. So that's one of the things that we had to like talk through and really figure out once we got married, is like, yeah, the business side of that.
Yeah. Okay. That was good. It's not something I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not in the vein of like increasing it to make sure that debts and like the joint aspect of, I
Mm-hmm.
definitely thought about like increasing the insurance as far as like estate planning and that, but not like bringing in, okay, so what are your debts now and what needs to be covered based upon what your assets, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's good. um Taxes,
Mm-hmm.
haven't gotten to filing them. It's a married couple. So what has been your experience? What are the benefits? What does your tax people
Okay, well, so,
say?
because I mean, we still owed, so it was what it was. But we did owe less because we were married.
Okay.
I think that there's a you can see the benefit even in your take home check of married filing jointly. I can't really speak to married filing single, because that my understanding is that only makes sense in certain circumstances. So you would have to talk to your tax professional
Okay.
to see if that
Okay.
makes sense for you to
Okay.
be married, filing single. But 9 times out of 10, if you're married, you should file jointly for the benefits. So you do see a difference in your take home versus when you're single,
Hmm.
because it's just more beneficial from that standpoint. Um, I will say that's where I learned about like the tax estimator and everything,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
sometimes for whatever reason, even though they pick because I don't add nothing additional, the withholdings still don't quite add up. So like making sure that you use the estimator to try to figure that out. But yeah, we were able to take advantage of the deductible. I think ultimately, this being our first year that we went through it, it was really talking to what we could do going forward. And some of that was one of the things was, I think at the time he had an FSA, which
Mhm.
there's some benefits to that, but FSA, like, you use it or lose it
Mhm.
really. But the biggest tax benefit, especially if you're married, is an HSA,
Mhm.
because you can offset those, from a tax standpoint.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that we learned going forward is like, no, you need to have an HSA,
Mhm.
because those are monies that we can offset, in terms of what we potentially owe.
Which is also something to look into if you're single. I have had an HSA for a long time and did not have an FSA. Had a daycare flexible spending account, but outside of that, um, opted found it more beneficial to have the HSA to the FSA. So look into that. Look into that, single or married.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the biggest thing, as far as that went. So again, going into the second year, we'll see. We made some adjustments, so
So I'm
be better.
curious when you did your withholding, like change your withholding to marry filing jointly, you did that during the life event period?
So for me, I was going into a new company, so I never really had to change. I
Gotcha.
was already
Okay.
married,
Makes
but he
sense. Where
had to
he had to do it for
change,
life. Okay.
at his company, and so he was changing from single to married, filing jointly, and it made a difference in his paycheck.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was, that. Like I said, we've only had 1 year of it, so I
Mhm.
can't
Mhm.
really speak as much to it.
Mhm.
But the other thing that we had to do, as far as like, when we think of the cost of a marriage outside the lovey-dovey and the things, is we had to update our wills,
Mhm.
because again, when you're coming together with a
So important.
person, your you being around, and the assets, or to some extent debts that you create, impact someone else.
Mhm.
And so you're making sure that you're not just leaving it to chance. And so how we would want to deal with both of our homes, and we had conversations beforehand, because it was just like, I don't want there to be any surprises, in terms of how we want to handle things. Again, he has kids, so like, how does that look? What do you want to do
Mhm.
here versus, and so, those are things to really like talk through, and try to get done ahead of time, or at least within that first couple months of marriage, so that it's done. And
Mhm.
you really don't have to update again, unless I don't know, if you grow significantly asset wise, or if start a family, perhaps you might have to update. But like, for the most part, you're not updating your will like every single year. It's
Mhm.
something that you can
Mhm.
kind of set it and forget it. But for sure, especially with that insurance aspect, you're building a life together, so your coverage needs to be able to handle, you know, um, to hopefully clearing like any debt you have, and making sure that person has a cushion for a
Mhm.
while.
Mhm.
So, depending, your financial advisor would kind of tell you the formula. I don't know if it was, I feel like it might have been like 5 times your
Ooh,
income.
that's a lot.
I feel like the last time I read up, it was that. So like, again, and that might not be the same policy. That might
Mhm.
just be in your
Mhm.
various
Mhm.
coverages. But just that's the thing that makes sure that when you're no longer here, like, people aren't struggling.
Yeah.
So.
I would definitely say if you're not as familiar, and even if you are familiar, I mean, I'm a lawyer and got a lawyer. So, talk to an estate planning attorney and pass that information on because, like she said, now you are covering um, someone else. Like, it's not just about you and you being protected anymore. And this is one of the huge spaces where if you don't say nothing, the state will. Um, when it comes to marriage and who's going to get what, if you don't have it documented. So if there's anything that you want, going to certain places, you might have nieces and nephews, grown children, and it's not even so much as impactful for the children because again, the state will say spouse children. But you might have nieces out there, you might have godchildren out there. That needs to You need to make sure that that kind of stuff is in your documents, especially now that you are married, because if you are silent, the states will, they're gonna do their thing when it comes to that. So yeah, that is it. It can be super beneficial, but you just want to control it. You want to control it while you can and dictate it and make it go the way you want it to go. If you have young children, making sure that they're a trust and all the things. So there are, did you have anything else with the, financial costs?
Those are the biggest things that I
Yeah.
think of in terms of like transitioning. Of course, I think there's things further down the line, like, if you have children and paying for the things, education. But I think just speaking to going from single to
Mm-hmm,
now
mm-hmm,
is
mm-hmm.
us, like those are probably the biggest areas to really like have conversations.
As someone that talked about finances before you ever entered into marriage, like, do you feel like there was an additional shift or an additional weight once you said I do?
Um, from a financial aspect or
Mm-hmm.
just general?
Yeah, financial.
I don't know that it was a like a weight necessarily. Like I think, I've talked through like the career transition aspect that was an experience. But I think that for me the biggest financial challenge, even though we had talked about it, was just more so really working together and figuring out what worked for us. Because again, full transparency, I was fine with pretty much like, okay, I'm a person, I don't really care what account it comes from as long as it got paid.
Mm-hmm.
So we could talk, we could meet every month, whatever, and talk through the bills, but like I didn't really care one way or another the account it came from. For him, I think being more visual for whatever reason, he liked to see it come out of a joint account because
Mm-hmm.
he could see it, whatever, whatever. So even working through that and what worked best for us, that for me was the
Was
bigger
newer. Yeah.
challenge. Yeah, because it was just like it felt like an extra step to me of like I could just if I'm
Yeah.
paying this and you paying that, like why does this whatever. So, kind of really choosing your battles there because again, there's some things where it's just like okay, whatever. And then there's some things that again because of your financial background or your experiences in life may be more uncomfortable that
Mm-hmm.
you might have to be like that don't really work for me or I'm not really feeling that. So I think the biggest thing like I said was just truly coming together and figuring out and still figuring out
Mm-hmm.
what works best for us in that area but
And
not
in this season.
yeah
Yeah.
but not so much like this person
Yeah.
you know
I think for at the time, newly, when I was newly engaged, for me it wasn't different, but I do remember because we had, like I said, me, I'm always gonna have the financial conversation. Don't matter how early on, I will have the financial conversation with you. So that part of it was not new for us.
hmm
Talking about wills, talking about trust, that wasn't new for us. Um, and I knew at the time who his his beneficiaries, who he wanted them to be,
hmm
and like just talking about like the, I won't say the responsibility of that is a better term to put it, right? Because when you are into a relationship, especially in a marriage,
hmm
the family is going to look to the spouse,
hmm
right? I pass away, they're going to suddenly look to my husband. They're
hmm
now looking at you as the wife, which is very different from a girlfriend,
hmm
you know?
yeah
Um, so you have to have those conversations because you're not just going to be answering to your spouse.
hmm
You have to be able to have these answers, and it looks real crazy when you be like, I don't know what he had, I don't know what he
hmm
wanted, I don't know what the desires were, and it's
yeah
like, come on.
yeah
Um, But I just remember him saying like he wanted to revamp his beneficiaries,
Mm-hmm.
um, because he was like, now, like y'all are now my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, it was a shift going from
Yeah.
like that. So I guess it's more so like thinking about that, and that was before we even got married. Like once he proposed, he was like, all right, like this whole beneficial, I need to revamp that because
Mm-hmm.
like y'all are my responsibility. He was like, if it was a good thing for him, he was like,
Mm-hmm.
I had never experienced, I didn't even know I was gonna feel this way. He was like, nah, I gotta take care of them. Like they mind, they gotta be good,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it definitely goes both ways. That is not from me, especially in a relationship where they're both partners are contributing like that. For the female as well, when you pass, like you want to make sure that whatever bills y'all have accumulated, your husband is not having to now go out here and work 3 jobs to continue to, so you want to make sure that both partners can continue to sustain, can continue to um, live and have the conversations. I think it's equally important. I will not take away from the fact that it is definitely a bigger burden on the man
Mm-hmm.
when it is. That's what you're designed to do. And the woman is designed to nurture. I strongly believe that. So I am not saying that the burden and the thought from a man's perspective is not weightier or not heavier, but I'm just saying, as a spouse, as a wife, it cannot be disregarded. Like, I'm not the one, I don't need to think about my will, or I don't need to think about trust in leaving that kind of legacy. I think it's important for from both aspects of it.
Yeah, I think that, and even just to the last thing you said, even that conversation about, and some of that might be financial, and some of it not so much, but I think that there is a people have expectations, and they
Mm-hmm.
may or may not have been expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we could get into it more in another episode, but I think that that could be some of the transition too, of like expectations and what you think things are going to be like or look like or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for black men there is, for many, an expectation of that. You hear the P and P all the time: protect and provide.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's though what is expected of them in that relationship, and maybe not. But I think that has to be discussed, because I think that,
Or what that looks like.
right, and
Yeah.
I think that, so what might work for you or what might work for me, that might not be what another partnership desires,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
it may not be, applicable if your partnership is, same gender. So whatever, you know what I mean. It's the roles and who does what,
Mm-hmm.
especially, and some of that aspect can be from a financial standpoint, is very important to discuss as you're
Yeah.
transitioning, because if you just had this expectation of, oh, well, they doing this or they got this, is there's gonna be a gap.
Yeah. Um, so ultimately, out of this, the like I said, started with it, and with the biggest point is to have the conversations, right? Put plans in place to take care of those things. Start researching together. The togetherness, the oneness mindset now not only extends to the love and the butterflies, it is going to extend to your finances as well. So have the conversations. They can be very, very hard starting out. When we had ours at the beginning, they were not easy. Um, but they were necessary. We pushed through it. It has tremendously benefited our relationship, in a very quick manner. And just you have to have the conversations, because have the hard conversation now, or somebody else is going to be having it later, and it's going to be hard for them. Because when it comes to your finances, it's got to go somewhere. I just think about the legacy aspect of it, like especially if you have children. Like, you have to have the conversations. Like, I don't not having the conversations leaves people blindsided. It leaves people with trust issues. It leaves people feeling a way, which maybe those are like a lot of the contributing factors to it being one of the top reasons for divorce. So just communicate, over communicate. Circle back after you done fell out because you tried to communicate and it didn't work. But circle back and just keep trying at it. You have to talk about finances, and the sooner the better. If you can get it in before marriage, do so. But it is never too late. Have the conversations.
Yep, for sure. I Ditto to what she's saying. And just keep talking and keep working through it. And if you need to consult a professional, that's what they're there for too, to work through that stuff. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you're following us on the things. Divas and Ducats on Instagram and Facebook. divaadvice@gmail.com. That is divaadvice@gmail.com. So take care of yourselves, and in the meantime, in between time,
have a great attitude.
Bye.
Bye.